Is this thing on? And here we are celebrating a 10th episode of A Date with Destinee. I'm your host, Eric Hansen of Eric Hansen Music, and I dabble in music, political punditry, shirt designs, in partnership with somebody. And as some of you might have noticed, I'm also doing a podcast. And Destinee is with us, and she's going to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Destinee. I go by Des. I am a bartender most nights, bartender and server. A crazy cat lady. I got 2 cats. I used to have 4. I'm starting my own candle business. I tried to run for political office against the horrendous Eric Swalwell this year. Didn't go well, but we'll get into that later. And I'm also a woman.
Yes.
Which is important.
And a chandelier, and she serves the spiritual needs of the community.
True.
On a nightly basis.
Very true.
And she'll also be present with me at a forthcoming event. Will you be able to meet us in person live at the famous winery in Livermore, Las Positas.
Las Positas
and,
Winery.
There's going to be some live music by the amazing McFunky. And I've even been asked to, it's also my birthday celebration. So I've been invited to come to the stage to MC for the group. I'm the promoter for McFunky, and I might even be enrolled in some of the musical performance of the evening. And so we are here on a lovely, what the hell day in June? June 3rd. 4th.
Wait, is it?
Oh, hell. Yeah, it is June 4th. I'm only a day behind.
June 4th.
That means I better get another cup of coffee. And this month we have all kinds of interesting developments. A brand new holiday that's been crafted up, Juneteenth as they call it, happens to coincide this year with Father's Day. Just imagine the fun in trying to sort that out, since you have what basically is Father's Day and Fatherless Day being honored on the same day. So that's going to create a lot of confusion on Sunday, June 19th.
Oh, my God.
And and so we do also exercise a little bit of humor here. So I'm sure that our audience has an exceptional sense for it. And for those that like to hear more jokes of that sort, I do occasionally appear at Tommy T's in Pleasanton at the open mic night, or whenever else I'll be able to get myself on the stage.
Open mic night. Yes, excellent.
And as our 10th episode, it only makes sense to do a little review on some of the amazing guests that we've had with us so far. And those include the legendary Nick Skye, who is an author, survivalist, and he gave us some incredible points on kind of surviving the coming famine, which maybe we can discuss that in the show a little bit. And we also had the amazing Art Bozeman, Navy SEALs and super sales personality, that shared his perspective and kind of the attitudes that help him overcome various challenges. And we also had the great Jim Ford that offered some guidance in the realm of nutritional science.
Nutritional health.
And health in general, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the holistic side of the health spectrum.
Yeah.
And if it's not whole, it ain't half. Well, no, it's it's just not worth paying attention to unless you treat the whole of a problem. You're just basically, and by whole, we're not talking about the ones dug by a certain political party every day.
I thought you were talking about something else.
And
True.
If you get on the wrong
the
side,
hole that the certain political party comes out of.
Yes, and they also
speak out of that hole.
And some are forced to dig their own holes in the desert, and you know how that goes. But anyway,
so many holes.
And none of them seem to know where to put what into what hole, and that's where we come to Pride Month. So the veterans that survive horrible experiences and get all PTSD'd on the battlefield, that fought for our liberties, get one day, and then the ones that don't make it back get another day. And of course, if you find yourself with some interesting proclivities and habits, that's heroic and gets a whole month to celebrate.
Actually, did you know that May is Military Appreciation Month?
Oh, my
But
God.
nobody, like no commercial companies, no conglomerates, like ever,
Oh, so it's an uncelebrated month. It's,
Yeah,
it's a
celebrate. No
quietly
one's-
celebrated.
Yeah, it's Military Appreciation Month, but no one really actually does anything about it.
I see.
So technicalities, it's on the calendar. It's just not as supported as the Gay Pride Month.
Fantastic. And so now that, now actually I was always, my own background, I feel that I should clarify my position a little bit because, we probably already upset, 70% of the audience. So my own personal background on the matter of, shall we say, or the subjects of hyphenated rights for people that are deemed or maybe in the past legitimately suffered some inconvenience. Now, those people had always assured us that they were basically just trying to live and let live. And I have a background as a libertarian. So I'm very much of the mindset of letting people do their thing. And I believe that all those rights are protected under the larger umbrella of something we call American freedoms. So if somebody wants to, different strokes for different folks kind of approach to life, I'm certainly not going to get away with it. However, it is worth doing a little analysis on the group that's more of a political movement that's adopted what I call the Marxist clown colors. Now, that rainbow flag wasn't originally assigned to the quote-unquote LGBT, but it was a flag that was specifically designed to represent people of color. And so you'll notice that none of the colors, if you add all the colors up on a spectrum, you wind up with white. But the flag has no white space in it. So unlike our stars and stripes, it has some red, white, and blue. The LGBT quote-unquote pride flag is only the other colors, right? Everything but white. And that's actually was the original movement that was part of the cultural Marxist movement that was basically designed to attack one specific demographic that was deemed the most American or the most likely to push back on tyranny. And that's specifically Caucasians and mostly men. So anyone else was basically suddenly given oppression points. So when you look at the way that factors, and then of course they add them up. So that's called intersectionality. So it's like, well, I'm a black and trans and woman, so I deserve all my extra stuff because I am 3 times oppressed. So they invent all this. They have a new form of oppression Olympics.
It's like a caste system, but for oppression.
Yes, exactly right. And so basically, anybody that doesn't check any of those boxes is deemed privileged and thus worthy of dismissing. And they're so privileged that they're not even really supposed to talk about anything, because so that if they do enter some opinion of theirs in a conversation on college campus or at the office, they're going to be asked to check their privilege. Can you imagine if you said that to any other class of people? It's like, oh, you're speaking. Aren't you one of these people? Do you really think you should be speaking? So There's this caste system that basically ranks with basically putting the alleged oppressors, which, there are some white men oppressors. And those are like the Rothschilds, the Bushes, the Soros, the Rockefellers. So those are real. But the idea of spreading all of their privilege and assuming that every man that wears a certain color skin, whether he's on the street or in a castle, is enjoying some kind of unfair advantage, is a very destructive game. And it destroys in a couple different ways. When you sell this for a decade and more, for maybe 2 or 3 decades, they've been selling privilege as part of the curriculum, which is part of CRT. And CRT is basically hate speech and child abuse branded as curriculum. And the way it works is you segregate your class. Okay? Does that sound wrong yet? You segregate them into groups based on their color and more recently their proclivities. And then
which should not be in the midst of children whatsoever.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So they segregate on this, and then they tell all the people of a certain skin color that are deemed minorities, whether they're actual minorities or not, that they're oppressed because of their skin. So what that does is it crushes their spirit. It gives them a profound, deep, and cutting message that why try? Because however hard they try, the big oppressor that's sitting across the class from me, some kid that just doing his homework, is the reason for every failure. So then it also paints targets on that person in the class. So now you have all kinds of fun at lunchtime with wild violence perpetrated by the oppressed on the oppressors. And that was always kind of a symptom in school because there was always kind of cliques, and that depended on the makeup of the school demographically. I know people that went to school in predominantly black neighborhoods, and the whites were basically picked on every day, and they just basically had to deal with it. I was raised in a school system that was predominantly white and had some black kids. Those kids were basically adored. They were the most popular in the marching band and sports. They were celebrated. Everyone wanted to be their friends. So it was like the exact opposite of oppression. And the other thing is that if there were any real oppression against those minorities in our schools, why in the hell would people be fighting like hell, getting degrees, getting second jobs to get their kids into a predominantly non-minority school? To be oppressed? I don't think so. But that brings us to specifically the new form of CRT, because CRT, again, is very hateful, very destructive, but now there's the gender identity component. Now, most of us agree at this point on teaching sex education in school. That's kind of become accepted. It's like, well, if you don't tell them, some parents are going to leave them in the dark, and some kids are just going to goof around thinking this, playing castle is perfectly fine, and that there's no consequence for those actions. So we need to teach them about sex, right?
It's true. I agree.
Well, do you know what? Teaching about sex education in an ordinary traditional fashion is teaching biology. So you don't need to have extra curriculum that covers sexuality or sexual feelings. And any adult that approaches a child of under 18 years with any discussion of sexuality, of what might feel good or what might be, something worth trying or something that's different, or some acts that might be less accepted socially than others that maybe are more noble, all of that is what we call a crime. There's, for decades, very clear laws against putting sexual thoughts in kids' heads. And LGBT pride is all about that. There's no way to explain it other than to say different people like to do different things. We might have our biology, but some people might feel a different way than their biology, or than what they're evolved or created by a creator on high to do with their lives to potentially create new families and new life. So you have children now that haven't even yet had their first lesson in birds and bees, that are in K through third grade, that is now only protected from wildly deviant and sexual discussions in one state, and that's Florida. And then what happens? Disney blows up, all the corporations go haywire, and all of Hollywood has a meltdown because this is a don't say gay bill. It's like, well, yeah, you can say whatever you want, but if you start talking about what gay means or what orientation is about to children, and again, anything under 18 is a child by law. So that means that anyone that does that is a sex offender. They should be registered as such, and then they should be barred access permanently from being anywhere within 100 meters of a school or park or anywhere else that a child is enrolled or frequents. So I might have soapboxed a little bit, people. And we do appreciate, we do celebrate one very important part of diversity, and that's diversity of opinion. So you're encouraged to answer with your own thoughts. And it's possible that any of us can be wrong. That's the first thing that you're supposed to learn with critical thinking, is that ideas might be right or wrong, but they should all be expressed openly. And nobody can pretend we live in a democracy of any sort where there's no democracy of ideas. And democracy of ideas exists in today's world in a thriving, diverse conversation with different views in a public square. And the public square now is Twitter, Facebook,
Instagram,
social media. Mm-hmm. And so anyone that supports any form of censorship is against not only democracy, but the most fundamental of prerequisites for a democracy. So, what do you think? I hope I haven't started.
No,
I think I burned up the whole introduction of the segment.
That's okay. Honestly, I think what you were saying was really good, and I obviously there are minor disagreements that I have. Not really even disagreements, just slight. Okay, so it's kind of hard to take a look at everything that you said and track backwards, but I fully support people making their own decisions and being who they truly want to be. We live in the United States, and if you live in the United States and you don't support freedom and freedom of expression, then are you really for freedom and liberty? I don't believe so. So I would 100% consider myself more of a libertarian in that category. If you want to be with whoever you want to be, fine by me. Where I draw the line is where you start expressing and pushing these ideas onto children. I don't think it's wrong when I was in, sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. When I was in middle school, I had a friend, I'm not going to name his name because it's none of my business to put other people's information out on the internet. But I had a friend who, we knew he was gay. We were 11, 12, 13. We all knew that he was gay. He didn't really come out and tell us until freshman year of high school, I think. It might have been 8th grade, ninth grade, don't remember. But there are some people early on, they know that they are gay. But you don't need to go and push the ideas onto every child, because children are extremely malleable. If you put an idea in their head, there's a huge possibility that there's a lot of kids who aren't actually gay, who are now struggling with sexuality in something that they don't need to be struggling with. What they should be struggling with is their homework, not their sexual identity. But that's the thing, is kids are malleable, and you shouldn't be putting these ideas into kids' heads, because I know that there's a lot of kids who are kind of being driven into a certain direction. Now, does that mean that we should exclude children who are gay and try and make them feel bad? Or no, I don't believe so at all, because like I said, I knew people in middle school and high school, we knew that they were gay. It was just a thing, some people are just, they know from an early age. But it's not something that should be taught at a young age. I don't think even when we were in middle school, we didn't talk about sexual things, maybe some people would talk about kissing, but they don't talk about those things in middle school. Okay. Those are things that should stay out of the classroom. They should stay away from kids. Okay. You want to keep a child's mind free from those, practices?
Well, that's the whole thing, is that children deserve a chance to learn
And
about
discover
the
themselves.
birds and the bees, and then some basic biology before we get on to the advanced subjects of putting a gerbil up whatever's backside. So the kind of thing that's going on right now, the celebration of deviance, is originally, again, I was all for civil unions. I was all for accommodation. I have gay family members. I have gay friends. I've maintained friendships. I think that the most absurd thing anyone could do is to hate on people for their proclivities. Okay, whether I consider them unfortunate proclivities or whether they're deemed the highest possible achievement in life.
Whatever your opinion is, it doesn't matter. Like, we shouldn't judge people based off of what they do, but that still being said, that shouldn't be enforced upon children. It just shouldn't, It's disgusting and repulsive that I see the left using the LGBTQ, using mental health, using sexual identity or identity in any way, shape, or form to push their own narrative. And the reason they're using these to push their own narrative is to gain votes in the future.
Well,
let's just be honest, and to have more control.
Yes, and on the control side of that, this goes all the way up to writings based on the main players. None of this stuff's conspiracy theory when the conspirators speak in their own words about their plans.
True.
And there's long documented history that there's a drive for population reduction among the elite royals that literally call themselves elites openly.
Yeah.
They're giving speeches at Davos, and they're calling themselves, "We the elites." And the fact that doesn't turn off as many people as it should is kind of surprising. But you have one of their agendas right now is to talk children into spaying and neutering themselves.
I know. It's crazy.
And that's exactly, as soon as you give a child a hormone blocker or any kind of artificial intervention on their sexual development, when they're prepubescent and so on, as soon as you do that, they've been spayed and neutered to the delight of the elite. And so people need to kind of see this agenda for what it was. We were all sold, and I was sold to some degree, that it's like, well, it's okay to talk about these kind of things. And they told a terrible lie during the Proposition 8, which was one of the last honest elections in California, on the whole question of gay marriage. California voted against it. Obama, on his campaign, said that he believed marriage was between a man and a woman. Trump was the first candidate to say that he believed in gay marriage.
Yeah.
So ironic, there's a lot of irony there to unpack. But the goal of the elites is to abolish marriage. So gay marriage was actually just to make it mean everything and thus nothing. And some of the useful libertarian types went along with it, going, well, the state has no business in marriage. It's like, okay, so you're not going to have family law? What happens when you have a marriage breakup and you have some kids, and who gets the kids and who decides what? That's called family law. And there's no way to do that without some community, without the wise elders deciding what's going on in the state. That's one of few arguably legitimate functions of state, is to have some kind of system to deal with, resolve conflict, so people aren't just bashing each other over the head with rocks to settle every argument.
Unfortunately, man, sometimes I wish we could go back to those times. No, I'm just kidding. Kidding.
So we're going to cut to break. And again, I thank you for joining us on our 10th episode. There's probably a lot to unpack, and we'll look forward to hearing your point of view in the comments. Well... And here we are back on A Date with Destinee. And, I know we're hitting some subjects that might be near and dear to a lot of people and maybe heavy hitting today. And we were actually just during the break discussing how, like, having a guest kind of helps to draw focus away from just us. So there's actually an added thing where when just two of us, we're kind of like, we got to fill the space. So you get to learn a little bit more about some of our tentative positions, and we're both human beings. So a normal, healthy human being is capable of discovering new information and processing it and potentially, coming to different conclusions on some issues. But before we get back into what's becoming a discussion that seems to center on the theme of the month, there's a kind of a funny text that I got from a friend of mine. I think it was Mr. Jim Ford that was on a recent episode.
Jim Ford.
But he said that in every gay relationship, there's a yin and a yang.
It's true.
Yeah, so there's always one person that
masculine and feminine.
Yes, so there's always one person that plays into one role and the other plays the other. So there's very few, relationships that are as profound and connected as a monogamous, theoretically, relationship of one-on-one are never about being completely equal. There's a complementary aspect of it, and the only way that humans fit together is when you're realizing the yin aspects and the yang that are basically the aspects of humanity that provide balance. But, of course, I had to make a little joke about that. So I go, yes, indeed, there's one yin, one yang, and two wangs.
Oh, my God.
And again, I will occasionally be appearing at Tommy T's, so if anyone feels a need to throw tomatoes at any of these attempts at humor, that'll be your opportunity.
Yeah. So this is kind of what we were getting into on our break here. I was going to get into a little bit of storytelling, but it's not really a story. It's just personal life experience. So I personally support gay marriage. I always have. I grew up very liberal. Obviously, I'm from California. I have been pretty liberal my whole life. I have gay people in my family. I've been to gay pride. I've had gay teachers, gay peers. It's never really been a complaint of mine for gay marriage. Now, I've also gone to church for like half of my life. And there's always one argument I hear from my church friends, church peers, is that marriage is supposed to be a sacred ceremony between a man and a woman. And it is a religious ceremony. So, do I understand why Christians would not want, to single out gay people into not getting married? I think that's a little harsh. I think if they were singling out people who just weren't Christian in general, getting married, I think that would be more of a fair argument. I understand why they have the argument of like, this is supposed to be a Christian ceremony, and it just kind of feels like other people have like appropriated that. But that's where we are in society today. Marriage is more of a cultural celebration now, not so much not just a religious celebration. And also, I just don't think it's fair that they single out gay people and not just people who aren't Christians. Now, there is an argument on whether or not, gay people, trans people, should be able to adopt children and take care of children. And even though I'm not gay, I still have a voice, and I still want to speak out on this because my voice matters. I want to protect children and make sure that children always have a healthy and happy home to live in. I personally have experienced having 2 lesbian teachers in high school. I'm not going to say any names. Again, it's none of my business to put anyone's information out on the internet. So, but from my personal experience, I had one of these teachers. She was my teacher all 4 years in high school. I took a class from her every year. And the other teacher was only 1 year out of the high school. She was a more specified teacher. And they adopted a daughter, and they raised her, and they took care of her. And they were great. They were wonderful. They were very kind to her, very sweet to her. They taught her values and morals, and they didn't push any kind of, you have to be gay on that. She's not gay. She's straight. And I personally think, like from my personal anecdotal experience, that gay people should be allowed to adopt children. But then I also see some, maybe radically left-leaning TikTok videos of extreme leftists, extreme liberals, super gays, just like super straight, but super gays. No, just kidding. Posting how sexist they can be towards men. I've seen women post, well, I don't want to have a boy because boys are sexist, or I'm going to have to teach him to hate other men, or teach him how to be a woman, it's just like these weird ideological views. And it's really hard for me to decide whether or not I think that's okay, because obviously I'm a freedom of speech kind of person. I believe people should be able to teach their children what they want. If I have kids, I want to be able to teach my kids my values and what I think is good and right in the world. But also, who am I to judge what other people think is good and right in the world? But at the same time, I want to protect children. And I see some ideas that they push as very harmful, extremely harmful and sexist. Like women who are truly, they say they're against sexism, but really what they're pushing is just sexism against men, So it's hard for me to decipher whether or not I think it's okay, because I really feel like if there has to be a psychiatric evaluation, but then who's going to be in charge of the psychiatric evaluations? It's just an ongoing battle. Like, I, as one person, can't say, yes, gay people should be able to adopt, because, my experiences are very anecdotal. But then at the same time, I shouldn't be able to say, no, they can't adopt, because, well, what if there is a very kind and loving gay family who wants to adopt, and all, they just want children, and they can provide a well-off home for a child, and we take that from them, and we take that from that child. It's all very, I think it just depends. It's very, case by case scenarios. The problem is like, who's going to be in charge of, the psychiatric evaluations, because that's an incredibly important role to play if you're going to be putting children into someone's homes.
Well, that's the big question about libertarianism. Mm-hmm. I consider myself a libertarian, and I participate in some debate groups. One's called ANCAP versus ANCOM. ANCAP is theoretically anarchy capitalism, and the other is anarchy communism. I believe ANCAP is mild fantasy, because the only thing we can achieve if we do well is to limit the crap out of government, but not eliminate it entirely. And ANCOM is wild delusion, because it's like saying big state, no state. It's like they're opposite concepts. It's an oxymoron of itself.
Yeah.
But when it comes to parenting, I believe that parents do need to have a lot of latitude, both in medical choices, both in upbringing, in values, and in conveying what they experienced in the world to the next generation. And that being said, however, when it comes to adoption, when people make their own family, there should be very little intervention. And when the state gets involved, terrible things can happen. Like CPS is known to be...
Big sad.
Oh, space on the memory card. What the goddamn... Okay, so anyway, what can be...
CPS.
Ultimately, yeah, CPS was known to be, or caught basically, involved in some of the human trafficking and trafficking of children.
Oh, God.
And horrible abuses. So putting anything in the hands of the state kind of depends on who's running the state, how that works out. So whenever possible, the state should be involved as minimally as possible, and with much oversight from a community and, diligent community members that kind of keep watch on things. We used to have something called that in that with schools, where mothers would stay largely at home, and because they had more modern conveniences like dishwashers and washing machines, they were able to apply some time organizing with neighbors and checking up to see what the hell's going on in the public schools. And now, of course, parents that do manage to check up on public schools are treated as criminals by the likes of Gulag Garland, who is like a wild fascist that basically declares concerned parents as terrorists. And of course, he's directly involved in CRT course material through his own family connections. So it's all like a big incestuous circle of criminality and corruption. But when it comes to adoption, society has an obligation to provide the best environment possible for people placed. Now, there may always be an exception that, boy, this person was just a great parent and they didn't let their sexuality or any underlying contempt for the other gender get in the way of their raising of children.
Yeah.
But for that, people need to examine statistics. And there are countless cases where this is a method by which people that have no religious values, no religion to pin the values to, no morals, and make their own values and make their own rules, have an opportunity to access children. And people that basically go against the grain in society, that, well, society says that men shouldn't do this together, but, society says men shouldn't do this to boys. The same things that normally regulate behaviors are removed. So the vast majority of cases of child abuse are against boys. And so, and the funniest thing is I was arguing with somebody online and they were trying to say, oh, yeah, but these are actually heterosexuals. It's like, oh, I see. So basically you've just reassigned an obviously homosexual activity and the worst, most vile form of rape against a human imaginable on the straight community. So wow. These things have to be considered. All the science suggests that men serve a role in a family. All the science suggests that women serve a role in the family. So however upsetting it is to some about the lack of inclusion in the declaration that affirms motherhood and fatherhood, saying that both are important and to have one without the other is actually missing something in a child's upbringing, are kind of a sad statement of society and where we've found ourselves. So men are important. Fathers matter.
Yes.
Women are important. Mothers matter. To date, we still have two holidays. One's Father's Day and one's Mother's Day that honor these. And many on the left and the Marxists are actually still storming behind the scenes, upset about it. They're as angry with Mother's and Father's Day as they are with Columbus Day. They're trained to go against every single pin that holds society together. If you ask a child, gee, would you rather, not have a mommy or not have a daddy? It would be a ridiculous dilemma to put them on. Every child benefits from both.
Yes.
And in my own immediate experience, I realize individual experience is anecdotal, but you can't dismiss it all because that's the one that's most reliable. Any other experiences are communicated via statisticians, peer-reviewed papers, agencies, and basically the anecdotal side of experience is believing your own eyes and ears. I think both are required to make sound decisions for one's own life and especially for society. And all of my anecdotal experience indicates that there were some things that the mother of my children was very good at and essential. There are other things that were very lacking, where I filled a gap. And because of having both of those present, it resulted in a what I consider with some a great success in parenting.
And that's because parents have different roles. And what you were saying earlier is how even in gay couples, usually they each take on a different role. This is why children do better, one, with both a mother and a father in the home. Two, even if they're same sex, they do better with two different parental figures in general, both a masculine and a feminine. Whoever wants to take on whatever role, like, it's none of my business. But that's why. It's because children, they need to be able to see children with one parent. They only get their information from one parent. They only get their information from one person, and one person doesn't have all the answers. One person can lose their temper, and you need two parental figures to balance, to make sure that the child is learning.
And there's specifically on the father's side of the equation, mothers left to their own resource tend to be, they can easily fall into a habit of kind of being manipulating with, especially sons. And sometimes they're competitive with daughters. They have a certain spirit about them that if it's not balanced out by a present father, that can do great harm and damage to children. Again, when it's expressed by itself without the other. And they did studies, theoretically we're supposed to learn from nature also, right? The left love to talk about the animal kingdom, and most of them seem to embrace kind of a nihilistic view that rejects a separation between man and beast. So most of them believe that we are but animals, and frankly, that's perfectly fine. I think that's a position that's based in some measure of science. So learning from the animal kingdom might just help us. And so all these modern contemporary leftist dogma notions that I call, in a very loving way, Democrat religion, are easily debunked when compared against the nature of any other species, whether it's other primates, or other members of the larger animal kingdom. Mm-hmm. And for example, there was a story of elephants and rhinoceri. Is that the correct plural form?
Not sure.
Yes. So they removed the conservationists that were managing the nature in a way, intervened and removed these elder elephants from the herd. And what they observed caught them quite by surprise. The adolescent male elephants became extremely violent and started killing rhinoceros.
What?
So they were making sport of killing these rhinoceri, and they're like, why are these elephants behaving this way? They brought the elder males back into the group, and this behavior stopped.
The heck? That's interesting.
Now, if you look at today's society with fatherlessness, which is at the core of all intergenerational poverty, of all prison sentences and participation in crime and crime rate, when you remove fathers from homes, as Lyndon Johnson helped to do, then you create these adolescent males that don't have a strong male available to keep them from running wild with their natural tendencies. So they develop to be wild and barbaric, and we're seeing that exact behavior in crime statistics, incarceration rates, poverty rates. It's all based on removing fathers from homes. Now, you'd think that a nice movement that cares about the community, like, for example, Black Lives Matter, that just, has a wonderful name. And
wonderful.
Yeah, who's going to argue with that? No, they don't matter. So basically it's one of those names that's like puppies are cute. And if anyone objects to my group and what we do, then they think puppies aren't cute and they're just obviously subhuman. So this group, you'd think, would be kind of looking at the statistic in their community and would say, gee, maybe we do need to have fathers stay in the home. Well, if you look at their material on their website, the self-proclaimed trained Marxists are for the disintegration of the nuclear family. So is that moving in the right direction to help the community, or is it doing the exact opposite to exacerbate
the issue?
The issue, yes.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. I've actually read their website. What's funny is I am pretty sure they took that down and they changed it to something about the nuclear family, but they took out like the removing fathers thing because people caught on to that and they were like, oh, that's not what we want to do. That's not true at all. But on their list of things that they would like to change in America, disrupting the nuclear family is on the list.
Yes, and disruption is just a real nice, soft way of saying destruction.
Yeah.
And, the same word can apply to the middle class. Marxists have long been, ever since the writings of Karl Marx, have been about the destruction of the bourgeoisie, which means middle class. Oh, and by the way, people, some of you might think bourgeoisie means something different than that. And I know that because I was arguing online with a leftist one day. And I go, well, I have to take a break to go have my bourgeoisie lunch. And he goes, you're not bourgeoisie. I'm like, dude, do you even know what bourgeoisie means? Are you accusing me of a false claim of a position in the middle class?
Middle class.
And of course, the left are the most elitist people imaginable. So they speak against classes and try to agitate one class against another. But they're the most caste-oriented thinkers of all. They think of everything in terms of working class, management class, investor class. It's like, hey, in a land called freedom, somebody starts off in one class and moves up to the next. Mm-hmm. And anyone that builds a life well enough to have a comfortable and reasonable and dignified retirement transitions from the worker class to the management investment class and ultimately finishes in the investor class. That's how grandmas pay for their food. They get a little extra room and rent it out to somebody, but oh no, kill the landlords. That's the way the left think about everything. We have to soak the landlords. Nobody should be in a position to collect rent. It's like, well.
That's funny.
Well, it's like,
nobody should collect rent. Yeah, no one should collect rent, especially the state.
Yes. And so that's the whole thing, is that people don't realize that in a free society, in the libertarian utopia, there's something called class mobility. Whereas in the Marxist mind, it's always dividing people up. These are workers, and without the workers, there would be no profits. It's like, well, really? So basically every baseball star that pocketed millions it owes some debt to workers. Somebody, I mean, what? There are a lot of people that become quite wealthy without necessarily having a staff or a factory involved. But I guess certain kinds of affluence are okay and others are not.
Sorry, I'm doodling. I'm just drawing hearts. I'm not doing anything important.
Boring her.
No. I'm the kind of person where sometimes I need to multitask or I'll fidget. You notice how I'm over here and I'm always like. So this is my version of fidgeting.
The hearts are to reaffirm love is love.
Love is real, okay?
Yes. Oh, that's another thing that I commented on somebody's thread just the other day. They were doing all this love is love language. And I'm like, do you believe that every possible form of sexual act is necessarily an expression of love?
No. No, I do not.
Because if that's the case, hell, rape is love.
Yeah. I definitely do not agree with that.
Oh, and they left also as the last one. They wore war on women so hard that in addition to going after everyone's firearms, which is the only means of equalizing a scene where women can defend themselves from men that are on average more physically strong. Okay. The only way they can defend themselves is if they have some kind of method of defense. And that's normally a firearm in their purse. Sometimes it might be pepper spray or mace. Mm-hmm. Well, before people go on about, people shouldn't be able to carry a gun because guns are designed to kill people. It's like, well, not always.
No,
and in
no.
fact, guns are used defensively just by pointing it at somebody and solve crimes every day. But it's kind of hard to compile statistics on it because it doesn't result in a police report. And if it did make a statistic, they'd be manipulated by whoever runs the state, the FBI, and all the dem-infested agencies. So defensive use of weapons are real. But of course, we now live in a state where if you even point a weapon defensively from your own front porch against a marauding army that's threatening to burn your home down, then you're the criminal. You pointed a gun at their little darlings. And
They're just...
But it gets worse in other states. Other states that have long given up their gun rights now have women get raped routinely, and especially when they do their new migration policies to benefit the Merkel plan. So they bring in highly incompatible cultures in large quantities, and then they're like, oh, gee, suddenly there's a big rape statistic. Well, a young lady fell victim to this, and she was raped. Okay. Now, I know that all the women like to get on the Democrat women in particular are all tuned into the Me Too thing. Believe all women. If they say this happened, that's all that matters. And then, of course, later they say, well, believe some women. And the next thing you know,
believe all liberal women.
Then they're saying, what is a woman? So they go from.
By the way, you should
watch
watch the Daily Wire. What is a woman?
Oh yes, I saw the preview for that, and we do recommend it. Remind us in the comments to put a link in there for you. So that's where we are. But this young lady got raped already. She decided she didn't want to be raped a second time. Okay, I know a lot of you are thinking outrageous, but I kind of think she was within her rights to decide against being raped a second time. So she got some.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah, so she got some pepper spray,
mm-hmm.
and someone tried to rape her a second time. She used pepper spray to stop the rape, and of course, the state
punished her,
charged her
mm-hmm.
with illegal use of pepper spray.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, don't tell me about how the left is about protecting women from, that's, they obviously are kind of just...
probably more about control than anything else.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you.
And then, of course, there's a little dichotomy in the, before we go to our cut to a break, there's a little dichotomy between the talking points of the left. They've proven every single one of them to be false because every single hands-made tale cultists are out pounding the drums. My body, my choice, bodily autonomy, medical privacy. And so they've been rambling with these mantras for decades. And then suddenly they can't use it because every one of them is for mandates, which is basically medical rape. So it's like, no, we get to decide. It's for the greater good, and it's not your body when it comes to what we're going to jab you with. It's like, okay, so I see a little cognitive dissonance. So how did they deal with that while they were busy promoting mandates?
That is just 100% cognitive dissonance. The amount of people that I've met and I've talked to who personally believe in the My Body, My Choice movement, but then also believe and support mandates, it's astonishing. And then I've actually talked to quite a few people who are like, oh, I don't support the mandates. I didn't say I support the mandates, but then they don't do anything about it. They don't care. They show their vaccine cards. And it's like, if you didn't support the mandates, you wouldn't go along with it. You would actually stand up for your fellow peers who really don't want to put this in their body. Like I've had a handful of people just try to convince me, like, get the vaccine. Like, you don't understand. Like, it's not even a big deal anymore. Like, it's not even a big deal. I've had COVID twice. I'm alive. I'm here. It's astonishing. I feel like the people in California, especially, they're so, like, the cognitive dissonance is just so bad. They're really just rerunning talking points. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're seeing YouTubers or whatever they see on Instagram or whatever they just see on the news. It's just, they're just spewing whatever or repeating whatever they hear online.
Well, that's the other thing, is that they're programmed. So what happens is when people are programmed, none of that cognitive dissonance matters, because they're not examining anything. They're just basically reciting positions that they were given. And the uniformity of opinion on these groups is also a clear indication of brainwashing. A KGB study was done in the 60s that showed that once people are effectively brainwashed, and believe you me, the elites that own all the corporate media monopolies and that own the schools and all of academia and feed everyone their ideology, instead of teaching them to think critically, they teach them what to think, and that goes all the way down into K through 3, where they're putting pride parades and flags in kids' face, and these kids don't even know what birds and bees. They don't even know what the birds and bees are yet, and they're like supposed to grasp concepts of, well, what gender do I feel like? What do I, and what would I want to do if I'm naked with another person? So they're just making society
they're trying to make society more complex also. It's like humans by nature, we need to be able to categorize things, So that's why when you look at someone, you go, oh, brown hair, brown eyes, white person, black person, long hair, short hair. We need to be able to easily categorize things. I don't understand why these gender, I don't know what to label them as, because I literally can't. Gender ideologues, whatever. It's like how they just want to disintegrate gender. They want to disintegrate things that our society has been they're basically the founding of society for maybe thousands of years. I just don't understand it. Like, they're trying to make society harder and more complex and more difficult for people. It's like, why can't I say he and her? It makes it easy for me to distinguish whether someone is not a he or a her. Why does it have to be they, them, chem, alien?
Well, that's the other thing, is that's anyone that approaches a child with this quote unquote gender theory and says, you must call this person that, is performing child abuse that's criminal and needs to be treated as such. They need to be registered as sex offenders, as I may have mentioned, and prevented any access to a school or any place that has children. As for the destructive societal elements, or the aspects that are destructive, this is from an external source. This is external pressure. It's not a native grassroots thing that's just happening to society. And for example, China is actively promoting all this gender theory and CRT in our society. They're
not
calling
their own.
us, exactly. They're doing the opposite at home. They're the most racist people on earth. They literally will bar black people from going into a McDonald's and say, oh, sorry, you're not clean. I mean, these people are absolute hateful, creepy hypocrites that run their state there. But what it is it's weaponized cultural Marxism. And there was a famous defector from the Soviet Union that described all of it to us and explained why they do it and how they do it. And we know for a fact that, again, China today is actively promoting all these values, to call them, if we can call them that, destructive values, to undermine and unravel our society as a weapon. It's a warfare that's being waged against us from an external threat. And the fact that they do the opposite at home tells you all you need to know about how much they actually believe in the virtues of CRT and gender theory.
Yep. We should probably go to a break.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be right back after this brief message from our sponsors. And it's counting.
You remember I was talking a couple of hours ago about the sleepers. That's when the students from, say, United States, if they are trained in Lumumba University, or developing nations, that's the students I was dealing with, are being sent back from the Soviet Union here. Or if they were already in the United States, in the country, which is the object of subversion, they spring to action The sleepers go up. They slept for 15 to 20 years. Now they become leaders of groups, preachers, I don't know, public figures. Prominently, they actively include themselves in a political process. All of a sudden, we see a homosexual. 15 years ago, he did his dirty job and nobody cared. Now he makes it a political issue. He demands recognition, respect, human rights, and he rallies a large group of people. And there are violent clashes between him and police, his group and ordinary people, no matter what. It's black against white, yellows against green, doesn't matter where the division line goes. As long as this group come into antagonistic clash, sometimes militantly, sometimes with firearms, that is destabilization process. The sleepers, many of whom are simply KGB agents, become leaders of the process of destabilization. Doesn't mean that Comrade Andropov sends Comrade Ivanov to the United States. The person who takes care is already here. He is a respected citizen of the United States. Sometimes he gets money from various foundations for his legitimate struggle for, I don't know, human rights, women's rights, kid lib, prison lib, whatever. There are sympathetic Americans who donate their money to him. This stabilization process usually leads directly to the process of crisis. In case of developing nations, that's the area where I was active. The process starts when the legitimate bodies of power, the social structure collapse. It cannot function anymore. So instead, we have artificial body injected into society, such as non-elected committees. You remember I was talking about them here. Social workers who are not elected by people, media who are self-appointed rulers of your opinion, some strange groups which claim that they know how to lead society forward. They don't usually. All they care is how to collect donations and sell their own concocted ideology, mixture of.
So that's kind of a general idea. That was a famous defector from the Soviet Union that went on kind of to teach at universities. The methods that he was trained and that applied for subverting societies. And that's as he mentioned, that there were organizations, those are called NGOs, non-government organizations, and they form kind of a bureaucracy that is intricately involved in shaping politics and setting the tone for elections to decide the talking points or what the people are going to be or supposed to be worried about as their new issues. And so, and again, the proof of that is in what China's doing today. They're actively sponsoring all the CRT notions for us. They're sponsoring the gender identity notions in the United States while they're teaching their own population the exact opposite. So you know that it's not genuine. You know that it's basically a weaponization of cultural Marxism, which is a tool to basically disrupt and ultimately destroy society as we know it. And why would anyone do that? That's because to bring in the new power structure. And they gave it a name, Great Reset, New World Order. They openly talk about it. It's not a mystery. And so if people don't become extremely aware very quickly, we might be past Rubicon, but people need to really start to show a little bit of healthy skepticism about the activities of activists and all the NGOs and all the proxy armies of the left that are out on the streets. They're working in concert with the bureaucrats at the top. And it's called top-down, bottom-up, inside-out. And if you don't either look for it, respond to it accordingly, or your children and their children ultimately are the ones that live with consequence.
Well, All I have to say is just keep in mind that I am young and my opinions change daily. I only have a certain amount of information at this point in my life now, so I'm constantly updating and, reconfiguring my points of view and my perspectives. But yeah, I think I definitely got everything, like how I feel on the topic at hand for this month, out in the episode.
Yes, and that's the best that any of us can do, is to basically think through problems, to avoid the indulgence of digging in on a pre-existing position or idea. What's the word for that? Prejudice. The thing is to actually do what the college professors used to actually tell people to do, is to be a little open-minded and to process, to learn how to think, to learn how to be skeptical. Science and discovery is all about skepticism, asking questions, including questions that maybe you're not supposed to ask, including proposing possible answers that you're not supposed to embrace. And so we want to thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We very much welcome your point of view in the comments, and perhaps we can even discuss those in the next Date with Destinee. That one actually recorded.